next speaker is Friederike Jentoft, and she's going to talk about some novel method to assess activation on surfaces.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to present results today that emerged from a collaboration between the Zelinsky Institute in Moscow and the Haber Institute in Berlin. I will first introduce our concept, how we would like to use infrared spectroscopy to better assess the activation of molecules on surfaces. I will then explain our methodology and at the same time also some of the limitations of it. And then in the third part I will present two successful examples of the absorption of ethane and propene on zeolites. First as an introduction, and this is just as an illustration, so I won't go into detail. Basically, infrared spectroscopy is widely used in catalysis, and I would say there are two major areas of application. One is just to probe the sites on the surface here. For instance, it's shown the absorption of CO on a palladium alumina catalyst, and we're learning here what type of metal sites we have and what type of OH groups and aluminum sites. That's one type of application. The other type is basically to really absorb reactants and study the adsorbate structure and follow the reactions on the surfaces. This is shown here on the right-hand side, where N-butane was reacted on sulfated zirconia in quite dramatic reaction. Now, my main point why I'm showing this is that the majority of information that is extracted from infrared spectra is actually one looks at the positions of bands and identifies species. And that's almost exclusively true, except for some applications in the determination of the number of acid sites. And of course, there's much more information in an infrared spectrum because there aren't only band positions, there are also band intensities and band shapes. And what we are interested in is the band intensity, because if you look at the fundamentals of infrared spectroscopy, the intensity is actually a quite intriguing quantity. It is proportional to the change of the dipole moment during the vibration. And now what does that mean if you, for instance, absorb a molecule at the surface and it starts to react in a reaction that involves a heterolytic bond cleavage? Now while the molecule absorbs and is being polarized by a site on the surface, then during the vibration we might have a very large charge separation and an elongation of the bond. This is the onset of reaction. On the other hand, it means that at the same time we should have a very large dynamic dipole moment, and this is exactly what we measure with infrared spectroscopy. So our hypothesis is that the intensities in infrared spectra should tell us which bonds in a molecule that is absorbed on the surface are being activated. And that is equivalent to the reaction beginning. And so we should be able to use absorption coefficients as a matter of polarization and activation through a catalyst surface. Now, in a very simple approach, what we have to do to demonstrate that this hypothesis has any validity. Now, we could just take one molecule and absorb it on different catalysts and see whether we get different intensity distributions. Now, what was done here was that propene was absorbed on a series of zeolites Y that have been exchanged with different cations. And the adsorbate coverage was chosen such that the intensities here in the CH stretching regime are about the same. This was just done by variation of the pressure. And one can immediately see that the spectrum of propene on these three different types of zeolites features a very, very different intensity distribution. And of course, we would be interested here in the CC stretching vibration, which is the most reactive feature in this molecule. And we can see that as we go from sodium Y to calcium Y to magnesium Y, the relative intensity of the CC stretching vibration is increasing, and this is consistent with our hypothesis that it would be perhaps more activated on a bivalent cation in comparison to monovalent cation. And the calcium is, of course, in the middle because it has two charges, but it's a very big ion, and so the charge is relatively distributed. Now, this graph also allows us to compare the order of magnitude of effects. What we usually would be looking at is actually the frequency shift, and we see this here also in this graph. And there's, of course, the same trend in that it goes to lower frequencies, indicating the weakening of this activated when you absorb a molecule. The intensity variation, on the other hand, we can see is a very large effect. It's about a factor of 5 in the spectrum. So it seems that the hypothesis is in principle valid, and we would like to, of course, pursue it and to move to more quantitative considerations than just looking at these relative intensities. Because what these spectra do not tell us is that whether upon absorption we're actually lowering the intensity here or whether we're increasing the intensity over there. So we have to look at this and have to actually quantify and determine absorption coefficients. For that, we first have to select the right samples, and of course, zeolites are very attractive here, high surface area, and relatively uniform sites. What we included also were sulfated zirconia materials because they have exceptional catalytic properties in the conversion of alkanes, and it's one of our other research subjects. Of course, they're not as homogeneous, but if one selects the pressure and the temperature in the right range, then one can perhaps populate just one type of solvent. For these acid catalysts, of course, the interesting reactants are hydrocarbons, and I would like to point out that there's actually some very interesting literature by Gusoni, Castiglioni, and also Serlis, a series of papers where they have just looked at the free molecules, and they have found out that one can use the intensity of the CH stretching vibrations as a measure of the acidity of the hydrocarbons, which is in principle consistent with our considerations. Now, apparatus-wise, one needs a second independent method to measure the number of absorbed molecules to then be able to determine the absorption coefficient of a particular vibration. There are several ways out there in the literature. It's very often done as a gravimetric experiment that's typically done separately, or one doses a known amount and has complete absorption. That works when one has strong interactions, for instance, with pyridine. We have hydrocarbons, so we will have an equilibrium and cannot apply this method. So we decided to measure the pressure drop that's caused by the absorption in a volumetric barometric method. And we combine this with our infrared apparatus, so we have the cell down here. With the windows, we have a vacuum and gas dosing apparatus, the self-supporting wafers in transition and transmission, and the calibrated volume and number of pressure gauges. The main advantage of this method is that we can simultaneously measure the spectra and the absorbed amount. Why is that an advantage? Well, when we put a sample in infrared beam, there's always a tiny little bit of heating, so we don't really know the temperature. So if we have an external experiment to get our absorption isotherm, we won't quite have a match. This is demonstrated here. Of course, when we put the sample in the beam, then the absorbed amount here, plotted versus the equilibrium pressure, will go down a little. The second advantage of the apparatus is that it allows us to go to relatively low equilibrium partial pressures, and that is important if you want to, for instance, populate just one type of salt. So the typical data that we will get is two data sets actually. It's the absorption isotherms from the volumetric barometric measurement, and on the other hand, there's a series of spectra here with the pressure. And if you combine this information, then we can determine the molar absorption coefficient. What is shown here is the absorption of neopentane. Basically, we chose this molecule as a representative of small alkanes that would not react on sulfated zirconia at this low temperature, but just be absorbed and polarized. There's a little bit of a problem here because these materials are so active. Now we put these two informations together, and we essentially have to apply a modified Lambert-Beer law. We have the absorption coefficient, the concentration, and the path length. Concentration needs to be expressed in a different way with the absorbed amount per weight times the weight that we relate to the volume of the wafer. So we have the area of the wafer and the thickness of the wafer. Here's the path length. Then we make the rather brazen assumption that the optical path length and the thickness of the wafer are the same, and end up with this equation. Essentially, these terms here in the back, or here the C times D, what it is, it's an area density of the absorbers. So what does it look like then when we plot the absorption, and we're using exclusively integral absorption versus the absorbed amount? That then if this law is valid, we should actually get linear correlations. You see this on the left side for neopentane on the iron sulfate of zirconia. You see the initially linear and then are veering off. We do see that here for the H-mordenite, we have a much wider range of a linear correlation. This is actually what we expect also because because of the homogeneity of the sites on the H monadine. Now let's look at the values that we get for the extinction coefficients. And actually, we thought the initial results were quite promising because they were exactly as we expected. We have here the gas phase coefficient for the CH stretching vibrations absorbed on the monadine, which will increase, activated bond, and then we were very happy to see that on sulfated zirconia we get an even larger coefficient. However, then we made the one experiment too many, as one sometimes does, and this is the result that we got, which showed us that for an H monadine, same silica alumina ratio, we got a value that corresponded to the gas phase extinction coefficient. So something was wrong here, and we had to look a little bit more closely at these two monadine samples. And we noticed that when we looked at their infrared spectra, that they produced quite a different background here. And the background from an insulator actually in transmission spectroscopy comes mainly from scattering effects. And that can be explained by the different morphology of these samples. You can see that this one sample here that produces this huge background features an inhomogeneous particle size with quite a wide range, and we believe that this is responsible for this background, while the second sample here is rather homogeneous in its morphology. Now, of course, we're correcting for this background and subtracting it, but that is not enough. And so we were wondering whether there's a relation between the absorption coefficient that we observe, apparently, and the scattering ability of the wafers. Now, one way to assess the scattering ability of a specimen is just to take the absorbance value in a region where you do not have any discrete bands, where it's surely just created by scattering. And then we made an overall plot of all the absorption coefficients that we had measured for an entire set of samples of sulfatic zirconias and zeolites, and plotted this versus the extinction. I call it that because the light's not really absorbed, it's scattered, and that's the reason why it doesn't reach the detector. And you got this relation. Of course, the data points are not all on that curve because chemically these absorption coefficients should be different. But the main message here is that if we have strong scattering in the falsifying absorption coefficients, they will be too large. One can analyze the shape of the curve, and then one sees that this is commensurate with the equation that describes scattering in wafers. Now, what's the way out here? Right now, the best thing seemed to be to circumvent this problem and actually just to select better samples that will not scatter that much. And so we moved from zeolites monadine to zeolites Y. And we, of course, also see that there are better regions in the spectrum than the CH vibration region, for instance, down here, which is why we will return to the propene CC11 vibration later. I would like to show you some results now that were obtained with various zeolites Y. And we looked at ethane here, and we varied the wafer thickness. And of course, the thinner we make the wafer, the fewer problems we will have with the scattering. And we can see that as we reduce the scattering problem, we are also reducing the absorption coefficient. So we learned that the error is quite large, but then, of course, in this list of values, the lowest value will be the most trustworthy. On the other hand, I had shown you earlier that the effect, that is the variation in intensities as we absorb a molecule on different surfaces, is quite large. And we can still say here that as we absorb from the gas phase onto the sodium or the calcium, we get quite a different effect. And on the calcium, we actually experience an activation of the CH bond. I would now like to go back to the propene and look a little bit more in detail at the CC stretching vibration. Now, these zeolite samples that we used, they were not completely exchanged, they were just partially exchanged. So this is not a complete magnesium Y, it's of course a magnesium sodium Y. And what we're observing here, that as we increase the pressure, we initially start preferentially populating the magnesium, and then as we go on, we start populating also the sodium. And it's obvious from these spectra that one cannot completely cleanly separate here and get separate absorption coefficients for magnesium and sodium, but nevertheless, we try. And that's what we see here in this next picture, where we again have the band area versus the absorbed amount, and we have the three different samples, the sodium Y, calcium Y, and magnesium Y, and we see that we get roughly what we expect, except for some small deviations. For instance, of course, for the sodium Y, we would maybe hope that we just have one slope and a straight line. For the calcium and magnesium Y, we have very steep slopes initially, and then essentially as we populate the sodium, we would of course expect that these should be about equivalent slopes, the slopes always being representative of the absorption coefficient. So essentially, this works quite well, and actually our next step will of course be to demonstrate that the reactivity on these various samples will correspond to what we would predict from infrared spectroscopy. I should mention here we have also looked at the zinc Y, but we got polymerization immediately, so could not measure an absorption coefficient. I'd like to summarize the trends here in the vibrations of protein as it is absorbed from the gas phase onto these three different zeolites. We see that we're losing intensity in this stretching regime. We do see that we gain in intensity in the CC stretching regime, and also the deformation increases. What this means we don't quite know yet. This is quite clear in our picture. Increased intensity, increase in dynamic dipole moment, polarization of the bond, activation of the bond. And as expected, we have the largest effect here by the magnesium 2+ cations. With that, I would like to conclude. We have seen that the intensities of vibrations of adsorbates depend quite strongly on the absorbent. It is relatively easy to do an assessment of the relative intensities of vibrations, experimentally straightforward. One just has to absorb the molecule and look at the intensity distribution. I think a good example here was the propene on these three different zeolites with the different cations. As we move to the measurement of the absolute intensities and the determination of the absorption coefficients, it becomes, of course, much more difficult, as always, when one wants to do quantitative work. And in particular, here, the scattering effects in wafers have a strong influence. And when one always hears that it's easy to quantify transmission infrared spectra, but this is really only the case in the absence of scattering, luminescence, reflection, and such effects. So it's difficult to measure. On the other hand, if you compare it to the shift, it's a large effect. The shifts are small, but they can be very well measured with modern FTIR spectrometers. The intensity variations are large, but they're much tougher to measure. And nevertheless, I hope I could convince you that the absorption coefficients can serve as an additional criterion to evaluate the activation of molecules on catalyst surfaces. I don't want to finish without acknowledging my former co-workers at the Friederike Institute in Berlin, the funding agencies, and also some colleagues who gave us some samples. And I would like to thank you for your attention.
Very nice. Paper is open for questions. Questions? I have one. Normally when we do infrared, we're looking at the molecule attached to the surface. So all the bonds we're looking at is the bonds of the molecule, not the bonds with the surface. So my question is, your first hypothesis, you mentioned that you were looking at the polarization between the molecule and the surface as being proportional to the intensity. Whereas when
well, maybe I wasn't quite clear enough. The surface polarizes the molecule and the molecule absorbs, but we are looking at adsorbate vibrations.
Okay. That I want to make sure. Yes.
How do phase
Use the microphone, please.
Sorry. How do we incorporate the phase transition of the host upon adsorption into absorption coefficients? Like in some cases, when you come with an adsorbate, there will be phase transition, for example, in the case of ZSM5. So is it something we can consider to analyze absorption coefficient of the adsorbate?
I'm not quite sure whether I understand the question.
how do we include the information about the phase transition of the host, for example, ZSM5? So towards the towards understanding absorption coefficient of adsorbate.
I mean, as I said to Dr. Wolf's question, I mean, we're looking at the adsorbate here, so we're not. Also, in this case, we're not looking at any OH groups. We're not looking at any changes of the host.
Okay.
All what we see is how the interaction is reflected in the spectrum of the adsorbate.